And if anyone has any questions, just jump in or use chat or just unmute, because we won't always see if you have raised your hand. I mean, we should, but we don't always pay attention. Or I don't. Okay. So
I will ask you, let me ask you quickly, John. I
Sure.
know that probably yes. I know you put all the recordings of all of the sessions. Presumably I'll be able to watch and download the PowerPoints also, because I don't know that I want to be taking notes.
sure, you can download any of them. I think you can, I'm not sure if you can download from YouTube. I know you can download the transcripts. I don't know if the account is set up to allow downloading, but
If not, will you share the PowerPoints with us if I email you?
oh, the PowerPoints, if you ask for any, we can send it. Although in pretty much all the ones we've done, we have a QR code. So if you just watch the beginning of the video, hold your camera up to that and you'll be able to get that.
Okay, thank you.
And in fact, that's the very first thing here. And in most of them, we have both and by the way, Control-Alt-Shift-H. No, Control-Alt-Shift-H will hide that annoying control.
Oh,
Okay.
that's a hand trick.
So I had to discover that because it wasn't rolling off as it should.
That's handy.
So either scan this, scan the code and open it on a smartphone, or type in this URL, or we can copy it all, and then we have to do Control-Shift-H again. So we'll put it in chat, so you can get a copy of these slides. But I think we've done that in every session we've done, so it should be pretty easy to get to the slides. But if you'd like any that are not there, just let me know, and we will get it to you. Control-Alt-Shift-H.
Yeah, this round of breakouts, all of the presentations that John and I have done together so far have a QR code.
Okay, so one of the things that a lot of people still remember from the arrival of ChatGPT in the distant past of 2 years ago, or 2 years and a month and a half ago, was that it wasn't terribly reliable for research and literature reviews. And for the most part, that's still true, that it's a predictive text engine. So it's predicting the next word based on its training database. And it will make up citations, it will make up references and so forth. But there's so many new tools out there that work with AI, with the original AI tools, the generative, the generative transformers that will correct for that. And the most common practice is to take the output from ChatGPT and then submit it to, or run it through a database of actual research articles. And many of them work with the semantic web, I think it is.
Yes.
Database. So that makes it much easier to actually get some reasonable references for studies. And we're going to be talking about those, and we're going to ask everyone here just to try it on their own. And do you want to?
So like, if we're thinking about the different ways that these tools can kind of be used together, like John just mentioned that ChatGPT, while it's gotten a lot better and advanced exponential, like just a ton, right? Since even 6 months or a year ago, it's still, like the sources are still iffy, right? But you can use ChatGPT to kind of like help you get started, especially if you're not sure where to begin. So if you've attended any of our sessions in the past, you know that I really like to use ChatGPT for brainstorming for topics, especially. This is something that I do a lot with my students. So if we're thinking about kind of the beginning stages of a research project, and you're not sure where to start, you can use something like ChatGPT or Claude or whatever predictive text model that you prefer to help you kind of brainstorm for general topics. So you can also, one of the things that I like to do with my students and for myself as well, if you're, writing something that's argumentative, for example, you could also ask the AI tool to brainstorm or point out potential counter arguments or potential problems or considerations, like things that you should really think about as you are continuing your research to move forward. But I find it really helpful, especially if you're starting kind of, like many of my freshmen will start with like a big picture idea, but they have a really hard time narrowing it down beyond that, right? So I find that using ChatGPT for brainstorming can be very helpful. One of the things that I would like to point out is that many of the librarians here at Penfield have been talking about using ChatGPT to help you generate keywords. So this is something that I had chatted about a while ago with some of our colleague Ken Nichols and Deb Bowder, who worked here for a while. She moved
For
to
quite
a
a
different,
while.
moved here for moved to a different institution recently. But Deb and Ken recently published a piece about prompt engineering that talks about information literacy and how those two things sort of work hand in hand. So
With a
go
little
ahead.
bit of Star Trek thrown in.
Yes, with a little bit of Star Trek. So it's linked there. If you are interested, I would definitely recommend it. It's a delightful read. So we're thinking about, you know, like how many of our students have a hard time even figuring out what those keywords mean, right? So like, I'll give you a brief example. I was working with a student in English 102 who wanted to write a paper about how he liked going to the gym. That was sort of like his main idea. He was really into going to the gym, super into working out, you know, all of those sorts of things. And he came into my office because he's like, listen, like I've been searching and searching and searching for, you know, stuff related to my topic and I can't find anything. And I'm like, wait a minute, you know, so he and I worked together and I found out that he had been using our like Penfield's databases to search for topics. But he had just been using the word gym to search for things, right? So he typed in GYM and then different phrases, you know, like going to the gym, but he never thought about putting in a word like fitness, right? Or health and wellness. He had never thought kind of like outside of a word that he uses and knows on a regular basis. So he and I worked together to work on solving that problem. But AI can also be really, really handy to help you think about generating keywords.
Apparently, there was an issue with access. Apparently, I didn't make it shareable to everyone. Now, if you click on that URL, it should work. If not, I have shared it with you. So it should all be okay now because we did set it up so that you should be able to share it. You just didn't, I didn't set up the permission so that you had access to it, but that should be resolved now. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
Which is why the part of the screen disappeared for a minute. Okay.
Did you have anything that you wanted to add about that
no,
stuff so far?
This might be useful, you know, and there is that evaluative rubric where you can use it to evaluate the reliability and all sorts of other things about information literacy. Most people probably won't do that. You'd value the output itself, but it's a nice resource for people who are addressing access to tools and so forth, and the reliability of tools and the I forgot what else. And also it asks you to evaluate who owns the data that's being used and the privacy issues associated with it. So skimming through that might be useful just to think about some things you might consider when you recommend tools to colleagues or students.
I especially like the rubric that several of our librarians here published because again, if you work with freshmen, they have a really hard time understanding what information literacy is. And like we do all different sorts of exercises, you know, like in writing classes and things to kind of help them with that. But I like that this one is specifically for AI tools because I think AI tools bring in a few more levels that perhaps our freshman students were not considering earlier on. So it's another wonderful resource.
Okay, so some of the ways in which you can use AI tools, and well, we have a page on each of them and some references about it. One is just to find what else people have done on a topic. So you can enter in a topic that you're interested in doing some research on, and it will find specific articles with the citations and links to the resource when they're available online, and also platforms you could explore. And a nice thing is you can, with pretty much all of them, you could download that into Zotero or EndNotes or one of the other database formats so that you could directly import the citations as well as the articles themselves when that's available. It's also a nice way of summarizing research. If you're thinking about doing a research topic that you haven't really done that much with, you could go out and say, what research has been done on this topic in recent years? And it will give you a summary of the articles out there and the findings of those articles, along with citations and reference, which is a really good starting point, because it may be the case that dozens of people have already addressed the issue, and maybe it's not going to be as open for you to start on. And it's, on the other hand, if it finds there's very few articles that have been done on a particular topic, it might suggest that that's an area that might be a productive avenue of research, unless it's because people haven't published because they never found anything of interest. But at least it gives you a starting point. And you can also find studies that on a topic that meet specific criteria to facilitate a meta-analysis. This came about, or I thought of it for this use actually when I was at a session at OLC where someone was doing a meta-analysis of effective teaching methods in mathematics. And they started out with somewhere around 3,000 articles that they found. And it would be really difficult to go through and sort all those based on the type of study, the type of analysis, the type of institution. And it turned out, by the way, that when it went through all the criteria that they were using for their meta-analysis, they ended up with 12 studies. But they could use a tool like this to help narrow that down and find out just how many studies have been done that meet specific criteria. And then you could delve into those studies more quickly, more deeply, without wasting a lot of time trying to read over 3,000 articles. Unless you have a research team who's going to go out and read all of those, it could be a good starting point.
Yes, definitely. So I think like just thinking about ways, you know, and I feel like with AI, one of the big things is like, yes, we can do the things, right? Like we can do the tasks, but it definitely helps sort of streamline the process, and it can make it a little bit quicker, a little bit more efficient. And I also think one of the things that I like about some of the AI tools that we're going to explore today is it's just kind of an alternative way of doing research, right? They all look a little different, which I think appeals to different people sometimes, right? So it gives you some more options. But yes, streamlining is a big thing.
And I started off taking notes on that study that they were describing, because I was thinking that would be a really great podcast topic on the study they were attempting to do. And I was taking notes on what they found. And then as the numbers kept dwindling and dwindling, it was pretty clear that there really wasn't enough studies out there that could be used as a basis for a reasonable study or to draw many conclusions. So I ended up kind of just deleting those notes I took and moving on. But again, that can be much more productive. They, by the way, had a team of couple of dozen people who worked through all those things because it was an NSF-funded grant activity with multiple institutions involved. But I was thinking, you know, maybe AI might have sped that process up. They had been working on it for a few years by the time they got to the conclusion that there really just wasn't enough that met the criteria that they had proposed. Steve. Your hand is raised.
John, what I've often heard, and maybe you have or are going to address this, I've often heard, and I've actually seen, because in my courses, that a lot of the citations that are generated by various AI, and I guess specifically ChatGPT, are incorrect citations. They generate citations that don't exist. So how are there any sites that we know generate?
And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about, because generative AI is a predictive text engine. And if you find citations generated by ChatGPT or Claude to a lesser extent, basically it's predicting titles based on the words that you've used and words, you know, in the prompt. And it will generally find authors who have done some research on it, but it will recombine them with different co-authors, with different titles, and so forth. And often the authors have done some studies out there. Sometimes it will get the studies right, but it's rare. But these other tools that we're going to be sharing are all tools that will give you reliable citations and links to those articles so that you can go out directly and use them.
Yep, that's what makes these a little bit different from something like ChatGPT or Claude, because it's sort of looking for things. It's not predictive text, it's more of a research driven.
Right, it's starting with predictive text, but then it's
Yeah.
running it through semantic web to verify that the sources exist, essentially.
Right, yep.
So we're going to talk about a few of them. The first one is Research Rabbit. This was one of the early ones back in the early days of generative AI, about a year and a half or so ago it popped up. And it gives you a free online citation mapping tool. And you can connect research interests to related articles and authors. And, you know, if you plug in some of your own articles, it will show you what other people have done on the topic. Or if you find a study that you find interesting, it will find related studies and it will show the connections with the authors and so forth and give you links to the resources. Let's try it. There's a little demo on each of those. So if you want to try it later yourself, you could watch the demo or you could watch our video, but let's just hop over to that. And I got to remember how I logged in. I believe.
I think I log in with Google, maybe not.
It's not. So, okay, so I'm going to make a guess as to what I had done. Oh, I logged in with my As We Go email. I tend to do that for these things. And I think if I remember my password.
This is one of the ones that I found very, like John said, it was one of the earlier sort of like research platforms. So I found this one a little while ago and I liked it immediately because of sort of how it looked and the way that it was laid out. So when we get in, you'll be able to see that
If we get in,
it does some
apparently
cool things.
the passwords I thought I had created are not correct. That's one of the problems of saving your passwords on your own account. Do you happen to know your password
Maybe,
to it?
yeah.
Okay, so
look.
we'll let Stephanie try it.
We'll try it. So this one, you do need to make an account to use.
But it is, you can
It is
get a
free.
free account.
Oh, were you in
Oh,
caps
and
lock?
that's probably why it didn't work.
Were you in cap?
I-
You want to try
I'm gonna-
again?
go
Or do you want me? Okay. Let's try that one. No, this is embarrassing. Maybe I should sign up.
Okay, let me do one other thing. Well,
Okay.
you can keep trying if you remember. But we'd encourage you just to sign up and just create your own account and use a password. Again, you shouldn't use the same password in multiple things, but use one you're going to remember or put it in a password manager or just save it with Google so that you'll be able to rapidly access it so you don't run into these problems.
I can't remember. You want me to sign up with like a different email?
Well, we could, or because then it'll ask a whole series of questions. Let me try mine again,
Okay.
because I may have had the cap lux on without realizing it, because I don't think that always lights up.
Sorry, everybody.
Yeah, I know. This is one of the things I would have checked, but we were in another, I was in another session.
I was
all
on
morning.
vacation.
In the Caribbean.
In the
Where it was
Caribbean.
nice and warm. Oh, here we go.
Yep.
Okay, so I had the cap locks on. So here's for an example. So let's say we take a study. Here, for example, here I put in one of my own papers here. Well, let's say, let's take Larry. Larry Spisman, a retired colleague, and this will show you a map of who he's worked with. So these are some papers he's done with other people and so forth. He's got 164 citations, 27 publications. Or let's see mine. I've got 253 citations and 53 publications. But what you can always do is go in here, and once you've selected it, you could look at similar work, and it shows 1,321 studies that have been done. And it shows you this nice little image map showing you how the authors are connected to each other, what work they've done jointly and separately. And then you could, let's say, here's a paper, and this is a study that was based on a study that Larry and I had done. There's no PDF for that one, but you could download it when there's one available. Let's pick, let's say similar work.
The similar work feature of this one is one of my favorite parts because it's, I think, a really, really helpful way for you to find more stuff that's connected in a really kind of like easy, straightforward, like it's all a big list, you know? So I like that feature probably the best of Research Rabbit. And I don't know if you guys can see on Zoom, but like basically the way that it goes like horizontally. So there's like a scroll at the bottom, and it just keeps going over and over and over to the right, the more and more you build. So you don't really have to go up and down within like the main page, you just go over to the side. So it sort of like has that linear fashion, so you can see the connections.
You can see the whole sequence of your searches. And here's one. Here's a study from the National Bureau of Economic Research. You could download this. And you could also add it to collections. You can create your own collections, and then you could link that to Zotero or EndNote or whatever tools you use for. I think it also will generate BibTeX, which is if you're a LaTeX user for math typing and so forth, it will directly import it into that bibliographic manager. So it's a nice little tool, and it shows you what other people are doing related to it. And if we go way back over to the beginning, one of the options is you could add a paper, and the paper is you could put in the title of the paper, the DOI ID number, or the PMID, which is something else.
The PubMed ID.
What was it?
It's the PubMed ID. The two databases that this draws on are PubMed or Semantic Scholar.
Or PubMed ID, or you could put in whatever keywords you're interested in. Does anyone want to suggest some keywords on a topic you're interested in, or play around with this yourself and just try it and see how it goes? Any suggestions? Well, I'm going to just throw one in. I'm going to put in something on transparency in learning and teaching. And I'll just throw in Marianne, I'll just put in Winklemas. She hasn't really published much on it, but it will be cited. And so we're going to go with, well, there's a PubMed thing, but we're going to go to all subject areas. And here is, one was retracted. Well, these are the medicine ones. Why did that happen? I thought I chose the other. So I'm going to exit out of there and go to the, where did it go? It should be all the way over here, further over here. And what happened?
Were you looking for where you put it in? It was
yeah, but it should have given us another.
Oh, I don't know if when you X out of it, maybe it X out of the whole thing.
Okay, so in any case, I messed up. One more time, I'm going to put in tilt and Winklemas. And try that and do a search. Or you could upload the file and then it will track it down. And here we go. That's not the same tilt. Well, this is using tilt in a different concept. If I put in the whole thing, it would give me a whole series of papers related to Marianne Winklemas's tilt approach, which shows that using tilt reduces equity gaps and all sorts of other things. It increases persistence to graduation. And it's just a really quick way of gathering research articles on a topic that goes beyond the usual bibliographic references. So any questions on this? And again, you can find for a person. Okay, go ahead.
Do either of you know if Research Rabbit or others down the line, when we get to them, have added ways to hook up to libraries to check if your library has access to an article, since not everything is free?
I don't
know. But what you can always do is connect your Google search to it. You could either go from here to a library database to try to find it, or you could go into Google search if you configured it to search your local library, and then it will be able to find it. So you could always pull the reference out and then use some other tool to try to find it if it's not openly available. And Sandy.
So while you're talking, I opened up and made an account on Research Rabbit. And it said, what do I want to look at? So I did that. So how do you get that whole little like concept map thing, the little How do you get the,
It will automatically generate that once you put in a search,
Right.
once you put in, you can create a collection, so you could do it for different areas you're working on. If you're working
Right.
on 3 or 4 research studies, you can create a new connection, then add a paper, either.
so I just added like 5 papers. So,
Okay. And
but there's
then
nothing out in that space. Do you look at like, is that when you go and explore papers, like
you may
similar
have to
work?
scroll across to see what happens when you do that. Well, it should generate a list, and then from there, you should be able to click on some of the papers to see those.
Oh, click on it. Oh, I see. Okay.
Did that
Gotcha.
work?
Well, yeah, I guess I'll play around with it, but
Well, one of the things is you'll see this explore papers, and it will show you the options for similar work, which is one of the most useful tools. So you could either just look at everything done by specific authors or by suggested authors who are working on similar topics, or you could,
oh,
again,
there we go. If you hit similar work, it goes.
similar work will
Perfect.
show you a
Yeah.
lot of citations.
Yeah,
Typically,
okay.
Yeah.
again, unless it's an area that hasn't been explored very much, which
Yeah.
might be, it could be either a dead end or a very productive area of
Yeah,
research.
yeah.
That's cool.
I do like the feature over off to the left where you can make like a new collection, so you can kind of, if you're working on a few different projects, then you can sort of separate everything out that way, and it makes it all kind of like nice and neat, which I appreciate.
Okay,
Thank you.
Steve?
But when you did your search, John, you put in the name of an author. So is there a way to do it by topic without?
Yes, you could put in keywords for the topic, and then it will find, similar work or work on those topics. So it could be an author, you could upload a paper, and it will then go out and find out where that article fits, and then find any work done by the same authors or related work. So there's a number of ways of getting things in. It could be by DOI, it could be by title, it could be by author or keywords. So it's under the add paper. So, if you just type in whatever you want questions about, just put it in there and it will do this. And then you could go to the similar work to see what else has been done.
I'll mention also that while I play around with Research Rabbit, I did find that many of the papers that it found for me, I could access PDFs. There is the paywall thing that certainly happens, but I was pleasantly surprised while I was using this one that many of the papers that I was trying to look at, I could actually see the PDFs of. So I thought that was nice.
That's becoming more common. A lot of people are posting preprints, even if they're not
Right.
quite legitimate. Even if the publishers don't agree, we do find more and more papers are being posted.
And more open access things and what
And
have
there's,
you, but
there's more open access
Yeah.
journals, but also more people are just posting their stuff anyway.
But I felt like even like something like this versus like a Google Scholar search, for example, like I find that the results with this are far superior to a Google Scholar search for me personally, as I've played around with it.
So that's just one tool, and it's a very good one. It was one of the earliest ones. Another really good one is Perplexity, and this offers both a free and a paid version. And the free version will provide search results, citations, and summaries, and it's chat-based. The interface looks very much like ChatGPT. So if you go there, and it's just perplexity.ai, this one is signing me in because I logged in with my Google account. Now, I haven't activated this, but you could get a month free of Perplexity Pro. I suspect after that, it's going to ask you for your credit card, and I think it's like $20 a month.
I
So,
think that's what I looked up, yeah.
but even the free one is not bad. So here you would ask a research question. So let's say anyone want to find a topic, any topics you'd like to explore?
Explore online education, the benefits of online education.
Okay, so what are the benefits of online education?
So it's interesting, like as John's typing it in, right, you can see the differences between a tool like this versus Research Rabbit that we were just using, where this one kind of began to predict the text that he was asking it. And this kind of like interface looks a lot more like ChatGPT, right? Like because it does that predictive text thing. So it's interesting to kind of compare what the different AI tools look like and how they sort of operate, right? Whereas I feel like Research Rabbit, you have to do a little bit more of the heavy lifting, right? Even though it's not really that heavy, but something like this is more like chat based.
And it will give you sources for this, but it's basically giving you a summary of the research on a topic. And it's not giving you quite as much information about the underlying article, but you can always search through, for example, here, and it will link to some websites that it used. I think it will give you some citations too. And I'm not seeing that. Do you remember where that is?
Did you scroll down? Go back up. Maybe those are the only citations that it gives you up.
Yeah, but there's so
up at
many.
the top.
I
Oh,
have a
there you
paper
go.
on online learning and it's been cited like 1,000,
Right,
1,200 times,
right.
something like that. So,
What's there
um,
one?
so I don't know. I don't remember actually.
Where they
But
were.
it will at least give you a summary. I could have sworn, well, wait, share. How do you share it? So you could share
Copy link,
copy link. So that's
Yeah.
just sharing the output.
right?
So if you're working with collaborators, you could share the results of this, but it doesn't do a bad job, but I don't think it does quite as much in terms of providing sources.
No, this one is much more sort of like, and like, even if you went, like, for example, like if you go home or to like if you go to Discover, right, then it will give you, like, this one is, the platform is just so different, right? Like, it will give you sort of like different categories, like different things for you to consider looking into, where Research Rabbit doesn't do that, right? That one kind of asks you to get started with the keywords. So this one is more, I don't know the word I want. It's just different.
It's basically goes out and does a web search, and a lot of it will be web posts, which may not be as reliable as for
Right.
research, but it's not bad if you just want some information about what research finds. And it's going to be perhaps not quite as professional or not quite as selective in its research. But it's worth exploring or playing with a little bit. Elicit, on the other hand, does much better with
Mhm.
finding these types of things. And let's go here, and we can sign in. I know I have an account. Oh, Google. When all else fails, there we go. Okay, so now it will find papers on a research question. So let's ask a research question. What does the evidence suggest about online education? To go back to that question and to not accidentally hit in cap lock, so I get locked out of a password. And it found the top 4 papers right here.
Oh,
You
paid
need
free
to
and
pay
paid
if you
version,
want the
yeah.
top 8. On the other hand, if you find a recent paper, you could always put that into Google Scholar and find who cited it and so forth. But, and it shows you the number of citations for this. And all this, and you can, there's a DOI, and I believe you can export this, you can export the results
If you upgrade.
to CSV, RIS, and BIB, but you have to upgrade to export it. But you can always get the paper information here and then put it in some other bibliographic, some other search tool, and then get the actual papers. But it will give you the authors and the citations, you know, and so forth.
And I like the little summaries of the abstract also. It makes it even shorter. That's what, yep, right there on the right-hand side. Those are handy also, just for quick reading.
So I have a
Mhm.
question.
Sandy has
Sure.
it, yeah.
So it says here's the top 4 papers, according to who? Like, is it based on citation index?
I suspect it is.
Or is it just their friends,
Not
you know?
entirely, because it may
Cite
be
each
based
other.
on the quality of the, it could be doing something like Google, it could be based on the citations, but also perhaps the quality of the sources that cite it. That would be my guess, but I'm guessing.
The next one that we're gonna show, which I think is consensus, does something kind of similar to this, which we'll talk about in a minute, but it's got like a consensus meter that basically shows like who has decided that these are like good, right? So I think John's guess is a pretty good one. That's a good question.
And you notice it gave us 4 sources, but then at the bottom I clicked more and it gave me another 4. So, you know, and then you could add more steps, add more details and go back and search a bit further, just as you might if you were using ChatGPT. And again, they're all happy to give you a paid version with more features at a higher price, which, you know, if it's something you're going to use a lot, might be worth it. But if not, it's good to at least know what's available out there and to explore it a bit.
Most of the paid versions that I've stumbled across, and I know John has looked at a lot more than me, run about $20 a month. That seems to be about the standard.
Pretty much all of the AI related tools,
Yeah.
except some of the video creation ones or avatar creator ones will go up to $30 a month or so, but most are 20.
Like these is what we were looking around, right? Like, and kind of comparing the free and the paid version. Most of these, the paid versions were about 20 a month, which is what the paid version of ChatGPT is also. And Claude as well.
Okay, so Elicit does a little bit more and is probably a little bit more reliable if you want to find the original sources. And Consensus is one of the most popular ones. And there's both a free and a paid version. The free one gives you some basic search functionality and that consensus meter. So again, it gives you that type of chat interface. And so let's ask the researcher. Let's go back to Steve's question. Is online, let's modify it a little bit, online instruction, let's say as effective as face-to-face instruction, for example. And it's going to show you what it found, and we'll see that consensus meter. And there's a huge amount of research on this.
There we go.
So 54% of the studies it found said yes. 23% had mixed results, and 23% said no, and none said possibly. So they all had more definitive conclusions. Where we'll talk about gives you a summary in terms of the effect on learning outcomes, the effect on student satisfaction, what factors influence effectiveness, and gives you a conclusion for it. So if you just want to do a quick scan of what the research says about a topic, Consensus is really pretty impressive. And by the way, I haven't even logged into this.
Right.
If you log in, I don't think logging in gives you much more unless you pay for it, but
I think it just remembers, you know what I mean? Like it will remember your searches and things, like keep track of things for you. But yeah, it's nice that some of them you can just use without logging in if you choose not to make an account.
And this is actually a GPT created within ChatGPT. So it's something you could create on your own, but it does connect to the API for semantic web. So it has access to over 200 million papers that it uses for analysis. And the analysis is all generated by AI interpreting those papers, and it will always cite the research for them.
This is the one that was made by the science professor, right?
I think so.
Yeah, I was reading about sort of his motivation for doing this. I can't remember if it was this one or the
I don't remember either. Yeah. But you notice, by the way, here you can go in and here's a highly cited paper that says no. So you can click on it and it will take you to the information about that. It gives you a link to the Semantic Scholar information, and it gives you the citation for it and the ability to share that. So,
Sandy?
So I have a question. I haven't really used this, and I'm not a huge paper writer, but I have a paper I've been trying to finish for like 6 years. And I'm just kind of going, oh my God, I've been so stuck. And this is like, this is going to help. However, that said, I was just putting my syllabi together for the semester and, telling our students how to cite based on your Penfield Library citation guide. Do we cite, I'm only familiar with ChatGPT right now. I use Grammarly a little bit, but do we cite using something like this the same way? Or are we
generally
just going to go and say, hey, we got the article, I read it, and use that?
Yeah, the librarians can help a bit more, but I know if you're using output from one of the, well, Emily's hands up, but let me give you my take first and we'll see if maybe Emily agrees. In general, if you're using output directly from an AI tool, they should be cited in a format that resembles a conversation with someone because you can't go back and reproduce it. But you generally would not cite a database search that you're doing to find literature on it. You'd cite the original studies, but generally not that you used, Google Scholar or that you use one of the other search tools. Emily.
I have a separate question, but I'm happy to talk to that first. I would agree that if you allow students to cite what the AI generated here, then they would need to figure out how to cite output from an AI tool, which Nicole Westerdahl, another of our librarians, has put together a fabulous page about that, which is on the library's citation guide. It's also on our generative AI guide. You can get to it either way. So that can point out ways to do that. And then, yeah, if you use the actual source itself, then you would just cite the source itself because it doesn't matter how you found it. Doesn't matter if it, fell into your lap or you searched for it or whatever. My question though, John or Stephanie, could you scroll back up to your consensus meter? Because I have never run exactly the same query at exactly the same time as someone before, and I am intrigued by the differences in the consensus meter.
Oh, that's fascinating. What's
So I have yes 44%, possibly 11%, mixed 22%, and no 22%.
Maybe because I mistyped
I was
that.
gonna say instruction was
See,
spelled
John-
wrong.
Let's try correcting the typo.
Oh,
Gee, okay.
Well, I can try making mine have the typo. Do I need to take the O
no,
out?
No, wait, we got it.
Yep.
And then if you search for instruction rather than instructin or whatever, let's see if it's any different.
I missed your typo. I did put in the hyphens though.
Oh, now it matches, right, Emily?
Was it
44, 11, 22, 22. Yes, so now it does match.
Okay, so typos matter, which,
Yeah.
which is true.
Well, and your original one, I think, John, was from 11 or 13 relevant papers.
So it did find more on instructin
Yeah.
than instruction, which is a little unusual.
I'm glad that you brought that up, Emily, though, because you're right. Like it's when we're using this stuff, usually it's just us using it, right? Like just one person. So it does make me feel better that when the typos are correct, that it matches.
Although then I'm still like, it presents this as like, this is the consensus. We've searched so many bazillions of papers, and then they're basing it on 9.
9, yeah.
Yeah, and there have been, when I wrote a paper on this back in 2001, we had probably 80 or 90 references on this exact topic. So it's finding the ones that are most commonly cited, but it's certainly missing a lot of the research because there were thousands of studies on this topic a decade ago. And there were these large meta-analyses done on the impact of online instruction that focused on thousands of studies. So it's not getting everything, but it is getting some of the most highly cited studies on the topic. And then you have to backtrack to find more. You can always look at the bibliographic references from the most recent articles, or you could find one of the early articles and look at who cited that and so forth with various tools.
And like to piggyback, like what a fascinating thing to make sure that we bring up with our students, right? To tell them this is pulling, from these 9 different papers, but like there are thousands, right, of papers on this topic. So for them to be aware of that, right, I think is a wonderful point to bring up. So yeah, Sarah.
Okay, so I was wondering with this particular product, do you have to put in a yes/no question? What's it in order to get this consensus
In
meter?
order to get that meter, I think it has to be a question that can be answered with a yes, no, possibly, or.
You want to try it?
Well, yeah, so.
Try hypothetical.
So what else? What would be an example? Well, let's say, what does research say about online instruction?
Hmm,
because that's not a yes or no
yeah,
question.
that's good. That's a great question, Sarah.
Yeah. I hadn't thought of that.
So how do you get that consensus thing? I'm not getting that.
Oh, it's not giving it to us on.
Yeah, that's-
It's not, if it's not a yes or no, it may not do it. It may just.
Oh, yeah, because I wasn't, okay,
use
because I
it.
wasn't getting that, yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, if you don't ask a yes or no question, it just ignores the consensus meter. That's good to know.
that is good to know. Yep, so it just gives you the stuff. Yep,
Along with
I think
citation.
most people's research questions are not going to be yes, no questions. I wouldn't think.
Well, in economics, they pretty much all would be because you're testing some hypothesis. So it's a question of whether a certain effect occurs or not. But in other areas, it might not be, or student research might not generally be. But, you know, in many disciplines, you have a hypothesis and you're testing it to see if there is a significant effect or not. In which case the yes, no would apply, but it might not occur in literature or literary critiques and so forth.
right. Yeah, it would be, I mean, it would be interesting. And I think it would depend on, you know,
The
who's,
discipline.
yeah, the discipline, you know, and again, also like, you know, because I work with freshmen so much, many of the times when they do research, they're kind of, you know, because they haven't learned to go big, yeah, or start big and kind of get narrow. So I think many of them kind of start with a yes, no question, but then they go more into like an open-ended thing to like look for more things. So but it's a great point, and I'm glad to know this, right? That it changes depending on what sort of question you ask it. That's an important thing for us to remember.
Right, a consensus on a general question like this wouldn't
Yeah.
make sense.
Right,
So-
yeah, yeah.
And it knows that, which is good.
Okay. Any other questions on this one before we start to come to the end?
I think there's one more.
Might be one more.
And
was
this
the
one I would strongly recommend against. The reason we included this is because this is a one that's advertised most heavily to students on social media. I
Yeah.
generally see ads for this about 10 or 12 times a day on Facebook
Wow.
or, well, because I do a lot of searches related to AI on my computer and it transfers that information
Yeah.
over. And it's free for 7 days, but you have to put your credit card in and you have to cancel before the 7 days expires or will automatically withdraw $20 a month. And I don't remember if some of them will do $20 a month, but it's for a year subscription. And so you have to, I don't remember if this one does or not. But at the very least, it's going to cost you $20 if you forget to cancel it. But it is heavily advertised and there's a demo on it and it does a nice job. It will find articles, it will extract citations and notes, and it will summarize the articles pretty well. So
This is the one that was created by a science professor
Okay.
at some university. Like, I can't remember where he was from, but he had mentioned, you know, like I think in the demo, maybe like there's a thing and he was talking about how frustrating it was to try to find, you know, where the citations were coming from in specific sections of the paper. It's impressive. It does a lot of the stuff for you. So this one doesn't really, you don't have to do a whole lot if you're paying for this one.
yeah, and I created an account and then deleted it, so I can't go in and see my account now, so it's lost because
Yeah.
well, I guess I might still have access, but I'd be careful. I wouldn't recommend you join this one, but it is out there and it is being used quite a bit. I forgot how many millions of users they have, but it's many.
You can watch the handy demo if you want to see how it works.
Yeah. And
Okay.
so we just want you to try something and see how it goes.
We just have about 2 minutes
And we're
left.
just about out. So, any questions on any of this?
Is there one more? slide,
was
or is
it.
That's it?
That
Okay.
was it. So we're going to stop the share. Emily,
So I know that Elicit and Research Rabbit, the underlying database where they get their citations from is Semantic Scholar. Do you know if that's the case for the others as well, or if
I'm
they
not
have?
positive on that.
I have
know.
to look.
Yeah,
I think many of them have that kind of like.
I think
under, but-
consensus is,
Yeah.
and the other, and those other two, I don't know where all of them are from. They're not always very explicit about those things.
It's true, unfortunately. I could look for you if you want.
I can look. I was just wondering if you know.
Yeah. Sorry.
But each of them will at least attempt to verify these things and they won't generate fake citations for the most part.
It's true. Yeah, I have yet to find fake stuff with any of these yet, but I mean, I'm sure it might happen eventually, but I haven't had it happen yet.
Yeah, I was more thinking of the things that are not included in Semantic Scholar, like Library Journal is not in Semantic Scholar and things like that.
Right. Yeah, so it might be mostly finding articles that are available online, so some
Right.
things may not be there.
What, can you tell us what Semantic Scholar is?
It's a data, well, actually, Emily, if you'd like to continue.
I mean, Semantic Scholar is one of these free sort of researchy databases online. It does advertise itself as using AI somehow, I think possibly in its like what it does to your search terms. It's been a long time since I went and played with it because it's not great for anything that I'm researching.
Yeah, and I just want to jump in. I went to the Semantic Scholar website. It says it's a free AI-powered research tool for scientific literature.
Mm-hmm.
So that first one we were looking at, the Research Rabbit, that's looking at PubMed and Semantic Scholar, that's going to be very heavily science,
Right.
science oriented.
And it does have more than just the sciences, right? But I think it's definitely better in some subject areas than others.
And there will be more of these tools. You know, these all appeared within the first 2 years of generative AI, and many more are being created all the time. So.
Yeah, because Research Rabbit is my favorite, that's the one that I use the most. I haven't had any issues finding non-sciencey related things. Like you said, Emily, it's not gonna only do that. So I suppose it'll just vary depending on your discipline and what you're looking for. Like Emily pointed out, some of them will work better than others.
So do the librarians think this is going to replace all your big databases that we have to pay a lot of money for?
Sarah, do you want to speak to that, or shall
I will say absolutely not. So the thing is, these are not looking at the same content. So I'm no. Short answer is no. They will not replace it. I'm still learning how these might be useful, but I'm quite concerned about what, like, the lack of information about what they're searching exactly. And I think for specific subjects, I think we're better off steering students to the librarians to work on coming up with subject terms to use the paid resources that we are providing. I would say for faculty too, and we're happy to meet with you, Sandy, anyone to, meet with you individually for your research or meet with your classes to show them how to use the library databases and how to do, really effective research and understand what you're searching too.
But it doesn't have to be either or. That, if someone finds a really good article that's recent, they can always look at the bibliography and then go back and find those articles that were cited there in traditional databases and things. So it could be a good quick starting point if you just want to find out what people have said about a specific topic. So
yeah, I would agree with that. I think all of the librarians are like biting our fingernails because what we have observed with students is that if they can find and access something, with little or no effort, they might not take the time to then look at the references and go that next step, or they might not be aware that there are other potentially better things if they looked somewhere else in a database that is targeting their subject area.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I feel I feel very similarly about, like students in writing to everything that you just said, right? Like it's definitely a huge concern. I don't know.
Well, and one thing I thought is in terms of students in economics, we can only have 4 simultaneous users to Econ Lit, which is pretty much the only database that connects to all economic research. So if there's a lot of students doing research at a time, they have to wait for someone else to log out. And this could be a nice place to get started with research. So, I mean, it does have some benefits.
We should probably
stop though. Any last questions or comments? Okay, we'll stop this and we'll be back in about